Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It is the Rollout Show, episode number 38, the first of 2018.
Woo!
Not gonna lie, I'm a little impressed. I didn't think you were gonna last that long.
Oh, that was nothing.
That's nothing?
I had some left in the tank, but you looked like you were getting annoyed.
I was just about to jump in and say, like, hey, okay, Bradley's still going with the siren noise over here. All right. No, that was not the police reporting to the studios here. We're
This is a big show.
Huge show.
This is the biggest show in Rollout history. If you've been following us, you know that this is the matchup we've all been waiting for.
It's the matchup we've all been waiting for, and Bradley is so fired up, he actually just kicked me from under the table.
I apologize.
It's okay.
I thought that was the table.
It only hurt a little bit. It's fine. It's fine. I'm in a different spot than I usually am.
We hypothesized early on in the college football season that Georgia and Bama would meet up for the SEC championship game. And alas, Auburn ripped that away from us.
The dang Auburn Tigers.
But due to some fortunate selections by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee,
thanks, Ohio State,
Alabama squeezed its way in to the national championship conversation at the 4 seed. And with both SEC teams winning their semi-playoff or semifinal matchups, we have the SEC juggernauts in the national championship game. I'm very excited.
I am so excited about this. It is basically the student versus the teacher. Nick Saban versus Kirby Smart. The standard versus the up-and-comer. The two powerhouses of the SEC.
I was waiting for you to keep going.
I probably had a few more left in the tank, but I decided to cut it a little short. But it's so incredible to see how quick of a turnaround Georgia has made under Kirby Smart.
Kirby Smart's done a phenomenal job. Anything less would be a disservice to him. I mean, he turned
Georgia's a
Mark
good program.
Was a great recruiter, consistently winning program, always won 9 or 10 games. He flipped that, and last year there was some headaches. I think last year it was only an 8-win team. But this year, Kirby's second year, he really shown everyone what he's got. His defense, second best in the country. His offense, behind the one and only Jake Fromm, has become more explosive than it's ever been since Matthew Stafford left for the NFL. It's really, really fun.
And speaking of Jake Fromm, let's talk about the intestinal fortitude it took for Kirby Smart to make that change and roll with Jake Fromm. I mean, clearly the best quarterback on Georgia's roster there. I mean, the GOAT, the greatest Georgia quarterback of all time, if he wins this game.
So I don't give Kirby Smart any credit for that decision. Jake Fromm's been fine this year. He hasn't been great. He hasn't been put in a situation where he needed to win the game. And he's made a lot of dumb decisions. But Georgia kept winning. So Kirby was never faced with the decision, do I need to pull him out? So yes, Jake Fromm has done well enough. He's been good. But I don't give Kirby any credit for that. Because he never had to be faced with that choice. If Fromm had a 3-interception, I think Fromm had a 2-interception game.
Well, what about the Auburn game? Like in the middle of the season when you all lost to Auburn?
That was the very end of the year. At that point, you can't make a change. I mean, that first Eason, I think, was healthy week 5. So like weeks 5 to 7. Fromm wasn't great, but Georgia was destroying people. You can't make a quarterback change when you're beating people by 21 points.
And there's also something to be said for the chemistry you developed with the receivers and the running backs. And I think that's what kept him
Particularly Javon
in.
Wims. This was a guy that he wasn't good. He's never been good before. And this year he was by far the best receiver, and he's going to get drafted. And it's amazing because I didn't think any of our receivers were any good. Then you have guys like Isaac Nada, our 5-star tight end, that you sort of see the Nick Saban influences on Kirby because he goes from being a beast with Eason to doing almost nothing with Fromm.
I mean, I haven't heard his name actually said at all, and I've watched a few Georgia games. They were granted later in the year, but
he's been a blocker.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a shame because he's very good and he's got NFL aspirations. And when you've got NFL aspirations, you want to be able to show off your stuff. But, I guess that's sort of the Saban in Kirby. But I'm very excited. Nick Saban is 11-0 against his proteges in
yes,
college
he
football.
is.
And he's never faced one as good as Kirby. Kirby is the crowning jewel of Nick Saban's coaching career. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I agree with that.
He has molded him and taught him and tutored him more than any other disciple, if you want to call it that.
I agree with you because this isn't like a Jim McElwain situation. I mean, I think McElwain's still a good coach, but he wasn't there quite as long as Kirby. Kirby was there and just being groomed to be either the coach in waiting at Alabama or waiting for a situation like Georgia to open up. Kirby turned down so many offers.
He was absolutely being groomed to be the coach in waiting. When Saban retires, that job was Kirby's. He's beloved in Alabama.
Oh, absolutely.
And instead, his dream job opened up, and now he's at the University of Georgia.
It was such a betrayal and a heartbreak. I can only imagine that room. Kirby just walks in, Nick's sitting at the desk. I imagine he calls him son. How's it going, son? It's Pop
pretty good,
here.
Dad. Pretty good, Dad.
So you wanted to talk to me about something? Yeah, Dad. I took the Georgia job, and just a single solitary tear falls from Nick Saban's eye,
proving he is actually human and not a robot. Well, son, I wish you luck. I'm gonna miss you, but I will destroy you.
I will destroy you. But just so we're clear, you're finishing out this national championship run. You're coaching the next 2 games, right? Oh yeah, Pops, I got you. All right, cool, we're good. And then he goes all football and just kicks him out of the office. That's how it goes. Nick Saban showing a little bit of humanity, a little bit of emotion.
Just a sliver.
Just
a single tear. And it didn't even fall off his face. It was dry before it got off his chin.
Before it got off the cheek.
Yeah.
But honestly, though, you have to give Saban some credit for taking such a big hit from Jalen Hurts. I mean, man just like plopped on the ground and he looked like Saban was going to come up swinging at him.
He was not happy. I don't know why he was so mad, too. I mean, Jalen Hurts did everything he could
to stop it.
Not hit him so hard. I guess when you're that old, you don't want to be taking hits like that.
No, I mean,
really hurt yourself.
I mean, think about Jalen Hurts is a big dude, and he's coming in quick. So that obviously had to hurt Saban, and it's just funny to see that whole thing go down because to see the anger on Nick Saban's face as he's like trying to get up off the ground, and then Jalen Hurts as they're like trying to help him up, and just the glare that comes through to Jalen Hurts is just like, do you want to be playing for Savannah State next season? Because you do that again, happen. I can make that happen.
Yeah, you do that again, that's where you'll be, son. I imagine he calls everybody son.
The people he likes, like, Jalen Hurts, well, before he
You think he likes Jalen Hurts?
I mean, he keeps rolling. I think he likes Jalen Hurts.
Hurts has been pretty bad.
He's not the best passer.
He's not a good passer. So let's before we get into this.
Okay.
We should really recap the games that just happened, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, that might be, doing justice to our listeners.
Probably a good idea. So, game 1, the Rose Bowl, Georgia versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma comes out swinging, scores a touchdown on their first 3 drives in short order. They're up. They scored 31 points in the first half, up by 14 going to halftime. It was over. Let's be honest. Oklahoma was outplaying Georgia. Georgia's defense looked like trash. They hadn't stopped them a single possession. Oklahoma scored on every single possession they had in that first half. And Georgia could run the ball at will, like we talked about last week.
Right.
But they just weren't. The passing game wasn't going. Fromm was off. It was. I joke about not liking Fromm. The first half of the Rose Bowl, Fromm was bad. He was missing throws like crazy.
He wasn't very good.
spoiler alert, he was really good in the second half. Kirby, he does his coaching thing, learn from the best, make some adjustments. Oklahoma comes out, second half, kick a field goal. Wow. Georgia was able to hold them to a field goal. It's a miracle.
You were super pumped about that because during the entire first half, Bradley was just sitting there, well, it's over. Yeah, it's over. Now it's really over.
It was over. I mean, Georgia couldn't stop Oklahoma. Oklahoma was moving at will. Nothing Georgia did. Georgia blitzed. Baker Mayfield picked it up. Georgia played 7 back. They ran the ball down our throats. It was not a fun game to watch in the first half. But Georgia, second half, comes out and scores 2 quick touchdowns. All of a sudden, it's a 7-point game. From then on, it just keeps going back and forth, ends up going to overtime. And Georgia is able to block a field goal, get the ball, and then score a touchdown to win. I haven't yelled that much in a long time.
No, you
Maybe
haven't.
ever. That might be the most yelling I've ever done in my entire life.
The amount of celebrating you were doing was pretty absurd.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I did enjoy
Not
it. It was
many
great.
people get welcomed in to see that side of me. It was an emotional night, to say the least. It's the first national championship I've ever seen Georgia be a part of. I'm thrilled.
You waited your entire life for this.
I really have. Georgia's last SEC championship was 2005. I started watching football in 2006. I mean, it's been a long road for me. And I was very, very happy. My father and I enjoyed some emotional moments together.
It was a nice moment. It was great. It was good to be a part of that ride.
Made some pacts that if Georgia wins the national championship, we're going to jump in a 40-degree freezing cold pool together. It's gonna
That's
be a good
right.
time.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
To Georgia winning?
No, I'm not.
That.
I'm looking forward to y'all jumping in the pool, regardless.
I mean, why would we jump in if Georgia doesn't win?
I mean, you should have jumped in after the last game.
I kind of felt like it.
You should have. I really wanted you all to. Because not only that, it was like 40 degrees outside, and that just would have been great to see.
It was real cold. All right, Weston, please recap Game 2.
Game 2, down in New Orleans. The Sugar Bowl. It is the trilogy. Clemson versus Alabama.
Alabama.
That's right. So, Alabama comes in. They're technically the favorite in the game, even though they're ranked number 4. And you could definitely tell Alabama was 100% playing the underdog card. Because they came out there angry. And that is one thing, 2 things that make a Nick Saban team even more dangerous. Whenever they feel like they're the underdog and have a chip on their shoulder, and when they've been able to rest for a month and get healthy. Both of those things came roaring at Clemson, and through the first half, it was still a pretty close game. It was like a 1-score game, but after that, Alabama just took over in the second half. Darren Payne basically had a pick 6 in his hands, runs it back, horse collar from Clemson offensive lineman, brings him down, and then Alabama charges down the field, get to a goal line situation. Darren Payne's playing fullback, runs a little route out into the flat. Jalen Hurts tosses it to him, scores a touchdown to finish off the play. It was a great thing to watch. And then after that, the game was pretty much over. Clemson tried everything, but Kelly Bryant just kept getting hits. And,
that game wasn't his fault. And
No.
Dabo really lost his temper that game. It was
he
weird
did.
to see. Because Dabo's usually, he's not calm, but
He's fiery, but not usually like angry fiery.
he really got mad at Kelly Bryant in a way that I thought was really unfair. I mean, he was under pressure all night. He had nowhere to throw the ball to. He was constantly running for his life. And I thought he didn't play great, but he didn't lose that game. I mean, the fact that they had no running game lost them that game. The fact that none of their receivers could get open lost them that game. And for Dabo to do that was a little unsettling. It also looked like Dabo got supremely outcoached, which
Usually doesn't happen to Dabo.
Well, I will say the interesting thing is this is the first time we've seen Dabo on a big stage without Deshaun Watson.
Yeah,
and
good point.
his team crumbled. I still think Dad was a great coach. I think that team will be fine given all the talent that's coming in through Clemson. But it's interesting to see that this is the first Clemson team to go up against a top-ranked opponent without Deshaun Watson. Because, they beat Auburn earlier in the year, but it wasn't nearly the same Auburn team.
Oh, not even close.
And Miami was good, but they aren't on this top 4, top 5 level that Alabama and Georgia and Oklahoma and Auburn now and Ohio State are. Like, I feel like that's the cream of the crop this year, those 6 teams. And Clemson really, really didn't look like they were ready for that spot.
And I think that's just something to be said about just the talent level between the teams or something. I don't know. I guess it's because a lot of the Alabama guys returned from last season, whereas Clemson was starting over at a lot of positions.
Well, when your offense is run through the quarterback, so Alabama and Georgia, their offense is run through the running back. It's the same thing as the pros. A running back is a lot easier to replace than a quarterback. When your offense is run through the quarterback and you lose Deshaun Watson, who then went on to the NFL to do amazing things before he got hurt, you're going to show regression. I mean, it's only natural. Not only is it the most important position on a football team, but you put so much emphasis on the position that it becomes even more important.
Well, and that's the thing we were both talking about going into the season. We didn't expect Clemson to be here, much less be number 1, because they had to replace their starting running back, had to replace a lot of guys on their defense, and also their best wide receiver, and, of course, Deshaun Watson. So they had a lot of key position players that, are no longer there.
And Kelly Bryant, I don't care what anyone tells you, you had an amazing year, and you should hold your head up high. I know you're a junior, so I look forward to watching you next year. I assume you're not going to declare for the draft. Please don't.
Please don't. Yeah, that's not a good call.
I look forward to watching you next year because generally the second year, as we've talked before, is where you see the most development for a starting quarterback.
Right.
I look forward to seeing Clemson play next year. I think they'll be better next year. Dabo just didn't have the troops ready. I don't know what happened.
I think that's part of it, and I think they're going to do a much better job next year. It's honestly like 2 years ago when Clemson lost the national championship game, and then you saw they were the ones who were playing really angry against Alabama the next season.
Absolutely.
They played all season like they were just waiting for Alabama and waiting to get revenge. And honestly, that's how Alabama played against Clemson last week, because they were there just looking for revenge, because most of those guys saw the heartbreak against Clemson. They were like, okay, we're getting revenge.
And the interesting thing about Clemson last year, if you remember, is they had some really close games all year. Deshaun Watson didn't look the same. That team looked worse. And it's because they were looking ahead.
They only
wanted one team the whole year. They wanted one team. It was Bama, and when it was time to lock down, they were great last year. I think they'll be really good next year. I'm not worried about Dabo or anything, but I would hope, Dabo, that maybe next time you do a little more coaching than yelling.
I wonder if it was just Kelly Bryant didn't follow the game plan. It would be maybe why he's getting so angry, because you'd have to think that Dabo knew what was coming with Alabama.
Yes. You follow a game plan when you have 3 guys that weigh 300 pounds coming at you free. That's all well and good. And I know, hit the open guy. I understand, coach. Do you see that man that's the size of 3 people? He's running at me at 40 miles an hour, and there's nothing to stop him. What do you want me to do?
And there's 2 other guys that keep coming in off the bench that are fresh to replace said guy.
You know what, coach? You go execute the game plan for a play. Let's see it. I don't know. I don't like yelling like that to me. You're supposed to be there. Number 1, as a college football coach, according to our current system, you are an educator. That is your number 1 job, supposedly.
He's educating by yelling in a big situation. It's just loud in the Superdome. You know how loud it gets in there. You got to yell.
Sticking his finger in his gut.
Hey.
It was fine. I understand that's how coaching is sometimes. I just, I hope I don't see it again, because I have a lot of respect for Dabo. You got to teach, man. That's why you're in this position. You got to teach. You're not there to yell. You're there to educate, coach.
And support.
There's no need to yell.
Pat on the back.
Everyone chill.
Tell him you love him even though you missed the field goal.
Nick Saban doesn't yell at players.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, let's... yeah, I've seen Nick Saban shove players. And Lane Kiffin, shoved Jalen Hurts. That's actually what that was when Jalen Hurts ran into Saban. That's just payback for Lane Kiffin just shoving Jalen Hurts last season. That man shoved him 5 yards.
Yo, Lane Kiffin is
a massively paid man now.
That he is for the FAU Owls. It's gotta sign that 10-year deal to be able to convince poor 18-year-olds that you're gonna be there long term. In 2 years, you're gonna leave.
Hey, he's got Scuba Tech just on lockdown. All those guys from Last Chance U are coming to FAU.
This is sort of the same thing we talked about with Vandy and James Franklin. I would love to see Lane Kiffin just turn FAU into a primetime program. That'd be amazing. When's the last time we saw a coach turn a program into something it wasn't? Tom Herman almost did that with Houston. He was so close.
Had he stayed a little bit longer, he would have been there.
I think if Houston had gotten into the Big 12 like they wanted and he stayed at Houston, then that would have been the example. But I can't think of an example.
Hate to say it, but Art Briles was the last person I can think of. He took Baylor from a crap program into a really good program. And
he had to do some sketchy stuff to do it.
That's kind of similar to what happened Ole Miss and Hugh Freeze had to do.
Tell me the last time it was done
legally
above the books. Tell me the last time it was done.
Might take a minute.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a little while.
It's basically just the same programs every year. So I'd love to see an FAU, even Scott Frost. I wish he would have stayed at UCF. I understand Nebraska's his alma mater, but...
Right. Last time I can think of is potentially USF with Jim Leavitt or Boise State with Chris Peterson and
Boise
TCU
State's a good
too.
one.
TCU as well.
I feel like part of what I'm looking for is a lasting legacy, because what happens when Chris Peterson leaves Boise State?
It's kind of fall off.
Back to where it was. TCU is a decent example. But even TCU has some legacy. I guess TCU is probably the best example.
Because, they had LT, but other than that, they really didn't have a whole lot of guys come through there before Patterson got there.
TCU is a good example. We'll see how that program does it when Patterson leaves, but I'll take that one.
That's about as close as I can get you to a legally...
More than I thought of, bud, so well done.
Thanks. Had to search deep for that one.
Okay. And if you remember our predictions from last week, I said that the Bama game was going to be a blowout and that the Georgia-Oklahoma game was going to be real close. And now I look real smart. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, way to brag there a little bit. Hey, part of my prediction was right. Georgia could just have their way with Oklahoma's defense. That's why I never thought Georgia was technically out of it. I know you were kind of being pessimistic about it, but it's just Oklahoma's defense is that bad.
They're really small.
Oh, yeah, they are.
Their D linemen are appropriately sized, but their linebackers and their corners look like high school players.
No, they do. They absolutely do.
And I don't know if that's a training conditioning issue. I don't know if that's a recruiting issue. I don't know.
They also didn't really look that fast either, which is
not
weird.
On defense. Their offense was really fast. But when Nick Chubb is running away from a DB, your defense is not fast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I understand if the DB then misses the tackle when he catches up to Nick Chubb.
Which is definitely justified because Nick Chubb breaks a ton of tackles.
Nick Chubb probably, when he runs a 40 at the combine, is going to run a 4.6. He's not fast. And for him to be running away from all of your safeties and linebackers is surprising.
It just really goes to show the lack of
defensive speed.
Absolutely. In the Big 12. We keep harping on it, but it's true. They're the least balanced team in playoff history is the Oklahoma Sooners.
Georgia scored 48 in regulation. Georgia 48. Should not be scoring 48 in regulation.
When was the last time Georgia scored 48?
I couldn't tell you.
I don't even think they dropped 48 on Savannah State whenever they play.
Maybe one game. Not this year. They haven't this year because all they do is run the ball. When Jake Fromm throws 18 passes, you should not be scoring 48 points. Their run defense was a joke. I've never seen so many 50-yard plus runs. Michelle had one from the 3-yard line.
And, I mean, that's the thing. Sony Michel was just having his way with Oklahoma's defense. The only thing they got on him was the one fumble that they returned for a touchdown. Other than that, the defense didn't make any plays whatsoever.
No, literally none.
So that just goes to show you.
Big 12 defense, non-existent.
Big 12 defense versus the power scheme of
and
the
of
SEC.
Course, then all the, Oklahoma scored 51. Yes, they scored 31 in the first half because Georgia had a really bad defensive game plan ready. The rest of the game, they gave up one offensive touchdown.
Baker Mayfield had 87 yards in the second half.
Yeah, that tells you all you need to know.
That's a win on basically any occasion.
One defensive touchdown, or Oklahoma had one offensive touchdown in the second half. They had one scoop and score because Sony Michel tried to be a hero, but they had one touchdown in the second half. The defense did fine.
Oh yeah,
SEC defense. Once Kirby got the game plan figured out, it was all good.
Oh yeah, which is what we pretty much predicted, and honestly, now we just move on to SEC versus SEC. And I
don't want to take credit for this, but the rollout forming, the next college football championship to happen is our teams.
I mean, it really is. I mean, this is the year of the rollout show. We kind of predicted this a little while ago. We just thought it was going to be the SEC title game. But hey, this is better this way, right? A lot more on the line.
A lot more.
And so we're looking up a few of the numbers. And efficiency ratings, this is based on ESPN's rankings. Alabama and Georgia are basically the exact same team.
Imagine that. Nick Saban's greatest disciple has a team modeled after a Nick Saban team.
What a copycat.
Shocking.
What a phony. What a phony.
Even on offense, it's all either a run or a pass to the number one receiver. That's 90% of the offense.
And whenever it's to the number one receiver. Other than that, it's basically a tight end or wide receiver in the firm. People like that. Yeah, you have to throw the fullback in there. Anyway, so overall for Bama versus 92.4 for Georgia. And it's 0.2 versus the defense for Georgia. A little bit of an edge at 88.7, 86.4. So surprisingly, a little bit of an edge for Alabama on the offensive side of the ball. Georgia has the edge there with a 54 efficiency rating versus 53.8 for Bama. So eerily similar.
Bama's team is probably a little deeper, which is to be expected. It's Kirby's second year at Georgia. But the Georgia-Oklahoma game was probably the most exciting football game I've ever watched in my life because Georgia was in it.
Ian Johnson proposing at the end of the game. It was a great scene.
That was a good game.
I don't remember that got me into college football.
Just the Statue of Liberty. It's the first time I saw the statue.
Except people in the state of Oklahoma, a Boise State fan. It was awesome. It was basically a very cinematic, everything that happened. And then the cherry on top, Ian Johnson proposing to his girlfriend on the sidelines, which is really cool.
I think Bama is going to control this game and end up winning. I think it's going to be a good game. Oklahoma's not going to get... I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm so nervous.
Oh, you're so nervous? Speaking of nerves, you gotta
This game is going to be 28... I would never bet this game because I would never bet against my dogs. I hope to pull this out. Never seen a Georgia national championship. Karma says Georgia should win because Bama's had enough.
Now.
Passing of the torch. Saban's had arguably his worst ever recruiting. First time in a few years. It would be the first time he loses to one of his proteges. Could be even that as motivation.
Oh, yeah.
I don't bet against... and I think Bama is going to pull this one out. Their defense is just too good. Georgia's defense is great, but I think it's overly reliant on a single play.
Right.
It's a harder argument to make. Georgia really relies on Roquan Smith. When Roquan Smith is content Oklahoma game, the defense doesn't function properly, and because of that,
brought plays to do just that, contain Roquan Smith, and have Bo Scarborough running around. I think Alabama's going to win because Alabama is still playing, hey, we have a chip on our shoulder card. Although it isn't the same team, they're definitely going to use that as motivation. They're going to tune out.
Should.
Oh, absolutely. The underdog very often. and you need to use that motivation whenever you can. And I'm with you,
They're
Rick.
just the 3 seed, but by every metric, they weren't the underdog to Clemson either.
Oh,
they
no.
were the betting favorite and the analytics favorite. It's what Nick Saban's done his whole career.
And honestly, I think Nick Saban is very, very pumped up for seemingly the beginning of the end for him, because it would be 2 national championship losses in a row. So and it's almost 3.
And being in all 3 of them. Oh, boo-hoo.
But that's a big deal for Nick Saban, and you know it is. There's a lot of pretty much winning above all else. Winning and making sure the guys go to the NFL, which he does really well at. But
my concern is getting guys to the NFL when he's only letting O.J. Howard get 15 catches a season. But
he knew O.J. Oh, yeah, because,
I
mean,
like
they're all
Calipari over there, who's actively trying to get all of his players drafted.
Right, I think Bama guys, if they fall in the draft, they don't get past the Patriots, because they just end up with Bill Belichick. Fell where Landon Collins, who was injured the second half of his senior year and injured through the combine, so he fell to the second round to the Giants, and he's been a beast. Seemed to have fallen because of like injuries or different things like that, but they end up doing just fine because they're really good football players. Another thing that I want to point out heading into this game that's a little tough that I heard on ESPN after the game is New Orleans, so you just go back to Tuscaloosa and start preparing for the game. For Georgia, you ride high and then you can still prepare that same day.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I wouldn't consider one huge disadvantage. Like, for instance, in the NFL, if one team played on the previous Sunday, the other played on the previous Monday, usually don't consider that a huge disadvantage. But it could certainly be something. I mean, these guys are going to be banged up. They're going to be hurt. They're not going to feel good. That's just sort of how it goes. I do wish that maybe, like previous years, it's been like a week and a half between the semifinals and the finals. I do kind of wish that there was a little more time. I just wish that they'd played the games on a Saturday instead of a Monday. But it is what it is. It's not like that'd be a valid excuse.
No,
could have a minor impact, but I don't think that's going to be a major impact on the game.
And I guess I'll get to my prediction for this game now. I might be a little bit high scoring for this, but I think it might be... No, I'll change my mind. 28-21, Alabama.
I think that's a fair score. I mean, it's basically what I said.
Yeah.
Except you have Blankenship missing the field goal and I have him making it, so
wow.
Screw you! I hope it's a good game. I just don't want to get punked. I'd love to see a national championship, but if it doesn't happen this year, it will happen because Kirby has a great team on his hands and he's clearly a good coach.
Got a great recruiting class coming up. I think Georgia will be just fine. I think it's going to be... I think fans are going to get tired of seeing Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia in the playoffs for the foreseeable future.
I hope so.
And which is fine by me because I like all 3 of those programs and love watching all 3 of those programs play. So if you're not a fan of Southeastern, the region of the Southeastern, not just the SEC, but SEC, ACC, if you're not a fan of that style of football, then I'm sorry for you as a college football fan.
Well, that's the better style of football, so
I mean, it's the football that kind of wins. I mean, that's why no offense to the Pac-12 teams, but that's why you don't see the Pac-12 powerhouse like everybody keeps expecting USC to be, because it just, I mean, they have all the talent in the world. It just hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened in a long time.
Not since Pete Carroll.
Yep, basically. Well, Marcus Mariota in Oregon. That was a really good team.
Chip Kelly and everything. Yeah, that was a good team.
That Marcus Mariota team that lost to Ohio State really had a shot to do something.
No, they did, because, I mean, most people didn't think they would get past Florida State and Jameis.
They destroyed them.
They destroyed them. Oregon's defense was what surprised me in that game, just making Jameis Winston force some plays, which made him look really uncomfortable. But anyway, moving on from one powerhouse to another powerhouse, the supposed real 2017 national champions, the University of Central Florida Knights. So I think you have a few opinions on this, Bradley.
I mean, UCF, they had a great season. The committee ranked them like 12th at the end of the year. That's absurd. They should have been in the top 8. If you're telling me that we had an 8-team playoff and UCF doesn't get in, that's a joke.
Ridiculous.
It's time for a new system.
Right.
Because that's absurd. However, UCF didn't play anybody. They play in a weak conference that my school, the USF Bulls, play in. They're the only other good team in that conference. And when you play in a weak conference and you want a shot at the championship, you've got to schedule some tough non-conference games. There's a reason why Houston a couple years ago had a legit shot at the playoff, because they beat Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's right.
When Oklahoma was a top 5 team, you have to prove you can do it.
Baker Mayfield.
You don't get the benefit of the doubt when you're from one of these small conferences, because to play in the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, even the Big 12 and the Pac-12, I mean, it's a grind. Because every team you play isn't great, but they're all good. Every team you play has talent and good coaching staff. And it's a real grind to get through that season. For Georgia and Bama to have done what they do is very impressive, because it's not an easy schedule. So UCF, I mean, they played some decent teams. I mean, they played USF, they played Houston, they played Temple. But no one, I think they had Georgia Tech on the schedule, but it got canceled because of the hurricane.
Right, that would have kind of helped them out a little bit.
I mean, it's Georgia Tech, though. If you're UCF, put Ohio State on the schedule. Put Notre Dame on the schedule. Put Georgia on the schedule. Put USC on the schedule. You've got to beat some big names to prove you can play with those guys. Because while it may not be fair, the assumption is that you can't play with those guys. And anyone who says that it's proof that they should have been in it because they beat Auburn is a joke. You don't understand human psychology or football or anything, because Auburn had nothing left to play for. Auburn was playing for pride and nothing else. UCF had everything to play for. They were playing for their own national championship to prove to the world that they're a good team. And you know what? Maybe if they run the table again next year, they'll get more respect because of what they did to Auburn. But they should. Auburn had nothing to play for. They looked like garbage in that game. If you've watched Auburn all year, well, not all year, second half of the year. You know that wasn't Auburn. That was an Auburn team that didn't care, that wasn't trying. That was just there because they had to be.
And I think a lot of that, it wasn't even Stidham that did that. I think it was more Kerryon Johnson. It looked like Kerryon Johnson
he was ready for the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he declared immediately after the game.
I mean, he was already banged up. He got hurt in the Iron Bowl. He tried to play hurt against Georgia, and he was done after that. I mean, at that point, if you're in college and you're not playing for a national championship spot and you're a first-round talent, your eyes are on the NFL. There's a reason why guys are starting to sit out their bowl game. And I would sit out my bowl game personally, unless it was for the national championship. If I was in the Peach Bowl and I was Kerryon Johnson, I'm not playing. There's no way. I'm already hurt. Why would I risk re-injuring my shoulder and cost myself millions of dollars for nothing? So it's a great story, UCF. I love a lot of their players. But, I mean, get over it, man. Like, if you sincerely think in a completely unironic way that UCF is the 2017 college football national champion, you have problems. I wish the college football playoff was 8 teams. We've talked about this before.
Yes, we have.
I think 8 teams is perfect because you don't have this situation. 4 teams, the committee's too pressured to put in the big schools because they know the big schools will perform. And
we'll get the ratings.
It's happened too many times, even back in the BCS system, mostly back in the BCS system, where a team would come from nowhere, win every game. It makes me think of the Sugar Bowl with Hawaii and Georgia. Yeah. Hawaii wins all their games. They look great. Their quarterback's up for the Heisman Trophy. All good. They get to the Sugar Bowl and they get shellacked because they don't have a chance. Because they just don't have the athletes. They don't have the speed. They don't have the size. So you have to prove it on the field. Hopefully, an 8-team playoff is coming soon, and in an 8-team playoff, I would hope that UCF would have gotten in. If not, then that's a failure on the committee's part. But in a 4-team system, you gotta beat somebody. You just have 4 teams is not in a league with 120 plus teams. You have to play some ranked opponents.
And honestly, I think a lot of this is because scheduling purposes. 2 years ago, UCF went winless. So honestly, I don't think they expected to make this turnaround. And so their schedule was...
The schedule's made a few years out in advance. Right. I understand that. But you kind of have to think about that. I mean, if you're a team in a bad conference, but you have aspirations of greatness, if you don't care, if you're just in it for the money, you just have the football program for the money, then fine, you do you. But if you're hiring a new coach with the intention of becoming a powerhouse, you got to recognize that years in advance and schedule some tough games. Like if UCF and USF aren't putting these big names on their schedules for the upcoming years, that's a mistake.
Well, it's like USF the past few years scheduling games up in Tallahassee against Florida State.
Absolutely. And that's huge. I mean, Florida State, this year wasn't any good, but they will be. Even if they aren't great, it's a name. A lot of it is just a name. That's why I even said Notre Dame. Put Notre Dame on the schedule. They're usually not amazing. Well, it's when every 5 years they have a good season, but it's such a big name.
Well, that's just like Georgia. Like one of the key wins for Georgia to pump up their playoff rankings were the win against Notre Dame, which was a really good win for Georgia. But at the same time, I think a lot of us saw that Notre Dame, while they were a pretty good team, they weren't an elite team.
Yeah, because they looked great the first half of the season, and then after that Miami loss, they just crumbled.
Oh, and they looked bad against Miami.
They clearly weren't up to snuff.
No, they weren't. And that's just something we'll see the next few years what UCF does. And I think that is going to change because I think this year basically changed their perspective for good. And honestly, I expect UCF and most likely USF to be in a different conference here pretty shortly because of all the publicity UCF is getting for this like national championship decree and this run that they've had. And I mean, you can see all the UCF fans drawing strong, and it's the second largest school in the country. I don't
understand why the Big 12 didn't bring on USF and UCF.
Or even Houston. It just doesn't make sense.
It's both, but just USF and UCF specifically. I'm incredibly biased here, but hear me out. You have two schools with surprisingly large fan bases. You would be surprised if you don't live in Florida how many people root for UCF and USF.
It's shocking.
And it's a natural rivalry. UCF and USF hate each other.
Oh, lots.
It's a sincere rivalry. So you get all that with bringing them into a conference. And they're both really good programs. I mean, USF, until Charlie Strong decides to leave, is going to be a really good program. And UCF hopefully can retain some of this. They've had a lot of good teams the last few years. It's just 2 years ago they had that 0-win season, and it kind of ruined their reputation. But don't forget about Blake Bortles being out of there recently.
And that was the year after Blake Bortles left for the draft was when they had the winless season. And to be fair to UCF, O'Leary, their head coach, was acting athletic director and was also basically on his way out the door. He was a lot older and everything, so he was just trying to wear too many hats for the university before they brought in Danny White. So it was really tough on him, and that's why I think you saw such a bad product on the field. And I mean, if you start a season basically 0-4, I mean, you're not playing for anything the rest of the year.
Right. And I really hope that USF and UCF both get in a big conference so that if this happens again, if you're in the Big 12 and you go undefeated, you're going to get into the playoff. If USF had won every game this year, even including Florida State, because Florida State wasn't any good this year, and they were left out, I would have understood it. A lot of my friends wouldn't have.
No, a lot of our friends would have been furious.
But as someone who can at least look at it as semi-objectively, with a little bit of bias, I would have understood why they didn't deserve a spot, and I probably would have argued against them getting a spot because they don't play anybody.
I mean, especially in a year like we've had this year, because you're not really leaving Georgia out, you're not leaving Oklahoma out, you're not leaving Clemson out, and it's the main toss-up was between Alabama and Ohio State.
And you're not leaving one of those two teams out.
No, you're not.
This year was particularly tricky. There have been years in the past where, like the first year of the playoff with the 2-loss Ohio State team getting in.
That set the precedent.
I think there was a chance, if UCF had happened that year, there's a chance UCF gets in over Ohio State. Because Ohio State didn't look that good until really Cardale Jones took over the last 2 games. There's a chance that season that UCF gets in. There's a chance UCF gets in over a 2-loss team. Problem is, there weren't any 2-loss teams this year.
No, there wasn't.
I mean, it was all, you don't find the first 2-loss team till like rank 8 with USC. Before that, it's Georgia, it's Alabama, it's Ohio State, Clemson, Wisconsin. That's 5 1-loss teams. And then you have Auburn, who took out the number 1 and 2 team that season. I mean, you can't leave Auburn out. So really, you get down to like rank 7 or 8 before UCF even has a shot.
And honestly, let's just sum this up right now. That's why we need an 18 playoff, people.
Please.
We need the 8 teams.
I have mixed feelings about the Danny Cannell formula, which, if you aren't aware, it's just give the winner of each Power 5 conference a spot, and then you have 3 at-larges that are determined by a committee. I have mixed feelings about that. I don't think it's a horrible idea. Personally, I would kind of like to go back to the BCS system.
Ooh.
I would kind of like going to the BCS ranking systems, which has mostly matched the playoff committee, but you get rid of some of this personal drama that happens with the committee.
The Ohio State AD being on the selection committee kind of
and it didn't work out for him, but he was arguing in that room for his team.
Oh yeah, same with Barry Alvarez being on the selection committee when he's about to coach a Wisconsin team.
It makes no sense. I think I would like to bring back the BCS system. Top 8 make the playoffs. You're done. You're not arguing at a committee. You're not mad. It's a computer. It takes in factors, spits out a top 8. It is what it is. This is what you got. I think that's my ideal, and that's actually what UCF is arguing for. That's what they want. They wanted an 8-team playoff where it goes back to a computer system so that this sort of thing never happens again.
And honestly, that seems like a good solution to me, because there are some years where a Power 5 winner really doesn't deserve to be there. They're still very competitive, but if, say, it's a bad Big 12 year and West Virginia wins the Big 12 with like 3 losses, and then they go up against like undefeated Alabama or something, and then just get wrecked, where instead you'd rather see a couple other teams that maybe went undefeated who didn't get one of the at-large bits.
Well, even just think of the SEC before this year. The West has always been better than the East here recently. Imagine if like a 4-loss Florida team upset Bama. They shouldn't be. They have 4 losses. They should not be going to a playoff.
And it's something like the Auburn-Georgia game from a few years ago, where it's like a tip pass that ends up, falling in the end zone in the hands of like a Florida receiver or something.
Florida is not one of the best
fluky team, fluky play like that.
I actually think I've just made up my mind while we're recording. I think a top 8 BCS system is ideal. Of course, 4 is better than 2.
Absolutely.
I can't dispute that. The 4 was a welcome change, but I think 8 is the number. 16's too much. That's too much football on these guys.
And then it just becomes basically like March Madness. That's way too much football.
And that just doesn't work in football. It's amazing in basketball. Football's too aggressive. It's too physical. You can't do it in football. I think 8 teams will get 8 teams. And yes, you have the people that are like, well, then the 9th team out will be angry. Yeah, you're right. But 8 teams, you're way more likely to get all of the deserving teams. And if that season there aren't 8 deserving teams, guess what? 1 gets an easy first round bye.
Yeah. Pretty much the only thing that would have been unfortunate for this year is we would have had to have, if it went off the selection committee rankings, we would have had to have watched USC in the playoffs. No offense if you're a USC fan, but that team had no business being in the playoff. Way overrated.
The best team in a bad conference.
The best team in a bad conference. I mean, even some debate whether they're even the best team in that conference or they just ended up just winning the conference. But
that's sort of why I want a more BCS system. Because if we go off the final rankings, UCF doesn't make it in an 18 playoff. And that is not okay.
That's absurd. Absolutely.
They're not playing in the MAC. I mean,
No.
these are former Big East teams. They're playing with some solid teams. They just aren't to the level of the Power 5.
Right. They're just not at the level of the Power 5. It's just, they definitely deserve to be in.
Thank you for repeating what I said.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to reiterate.
Just kidding.
Just wanted to reiterate. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry out there, UCF fans. I love your team. I love what you guys did. You guys absolutely deserve to be ranked 5 at the end of the year. No higher. Sorry.
Okay. All right.
Maybe 6. Ohio State did. They were impressive. Ohio State was impressive. So, you know what? They can have 6.
They can have 6. Okay. I still want to go to the UCF parade that's happening whenever that happens because I think that'd be real cool to see. But other than that, maybe I'll be the live correspondent for the Rollout show out there in downtown Orlando.
There you go.
So we'll see what happens. Do some on-site reporting here. Anyway, we have to get to one huge topic that I think is basically going to change the course of the National Football League. John Gruden. My word.
I didn't know where you were going with this.
Oh, I really set that up well. John Gruden. 10 years and $100 million. The coach, the Oakland Raiders.
The longest tenured and most money for an NFL coach's contract ever. For John Gruden, career 500 coach. I love John Gruden. It's gonna be sad to see him go from ESPN. I quite enjoy him. I know a lot of people don't. I think he's really entertaining.
Oh, he's very entertaining. He's a cool dude.
I think he's a good coach. There's no way I pay him $100 million. Turns out that the reports about the ownership stake, I'm sure they weren't false, but that didn't happen. Instead, just a nice fat check for $100 million. I would not have hired him for. I mean, there's got to be a discount coach out there somewhere, right? Like his winning percentage is like 52%. He's a career 500 coach. Other than that Super Bowl, he hasn't done anything. I
mean, he's been a little bit better of a coach than Jack Del Rio, but
I think he's I think he's an upgrade.
Oh, I definitely do.
It's just a really expensive upgrade.
It's just record-wise, absolutely. I think it's just he was that in demand, and I think this basically. Well,
we know Tennessee was interested, right?
Tennessee was interested. It's just, I mean, you can't fire your coach when you're going into a first-round playoff game.
You can once the season's over.
Right. So I think that's why that pretty much eliminated him from Tennessee. And I think it's just Mark Davis kind of acting like his dad did, getting emotional about it and just saying, all right, we're backing up the truck. We're making sure we get you here.
The one thing in John Gruden's side for this is in Tampa, he never had a quarterback. Not once.
Nope.
He's an offensive guy who never had a quarterback and just he put together some pretty decent offenses given that he had his best quarterback while he was in Tampa was Jeff Garcia.
Oh, he basically resurrected a lot of guys' careers and kind of helped them at the tail end of their career have a little bit of success. But other than that, it's just he was basically bargain bin shopping at quarterback.
So it's going to be interesting to see him with a legit offense. The Raiders got to work on that O-line. I have no idea what happened, but that O-line went from number 2 in the league to bottom 3rd. I mean, it was really bad this year, so they got to work on the O-line.
Got to work on that defense.
That defense still needs help. It was a little better this year. Marginal improvement, but not much better. Amari Cooper needs to remember how to play football again, and they need a running back. Marshawn Lynch, he's old. I mean, he's fine. He's old.
I mean, I honestly think I would consider cutting him if Lynch doesn't retire. He was just not good this year.
I think he was fine. I don't think he was bad. I think he did exactly what the Raiders asked him to do. He's just not that good anymore.
No.
They should draft a running back this year for sure. It's a really, really good running back class this year.
I mean,
when you can get in the 4th round, you could get a Sony Michel
or
a
Kerryon
Johnson.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was
someone
saying.
like that. I mean, go for it because those
absolutely.
are legit guys.
And they could team up pretty well with Marshawn Lynch and make a formidable tandem there for a while. I think it's going to be a really good hire for Oakland, and I think he's going to do very well for Derek Carr and everything. It's just when you see those numbers, it's
astronomical.
I mean, you have to believe Mark Davis was afraid he was going to like the New York Giants or something like that, some other team that was going to pay him a massive amount of money to go there. So I think he had to have been really in demand, or
I wonder if Mark Davis was just betting against himself.
I mean, honestly, he could have been. But I mean, all the rumors were basically Gruden to Tampa, Gruden to Tennessee, and then he may consider Oakland, is what you were saying. Because, I mean, how it ended with Oakland the first time, it didn't really go well. So
I mean, I have no problem with them paying Gruden this money. It's not like it goes against the cap or anything. Just a lot of money. It really kind of sets the market a little higher than a lot of owners probably wish it was. Not that other owners are going to start getting $100 million unless Saban decides he wants to coach in the NFL again.
If Saban decides he wants to coach in the NFL.
Or Belichick decides he wants to be a free agent.
Which
Tom Brady retires, Belichick's a free agent. You know what? Let's just see how much money I can make before I retire.
Actually, you heard about that report that came out recently.
Can you expand, please?
So basically, this is a nice segue here. A report came out of Patriots camp that Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, and Bob Kraft are all kind of fizzling out on their relationship here. So the main rumor was that Tom Brady wanted Garoppolo gone, and that him and Garoppolo didn't really like each other, and that Brady was ecstatic whenever Garoppolo was traded, and that Bob Kraft forced the hand of Belichick to trade Jimmy Garoppolo instead of hanging on to him because Jimmy G wasn't ever accepting like their contract extensions. So Bob Kraft is like, hey, let's get value here. He may be Tom Brady's heir apparent, but we got to get rid of him before, we can't just keep holding on to him and Brady plays till he's 50. So Brady was happy about that, but then you also saw Brady starting to show a little bit more age after Jimmy G was gone. So basically the main rift here is that Belichick is mad at Kraft, Brady is mad at Belichick, and basically all three of them aren't really getting along, and Belichick is a little upset about it, which could potentially lead to Belichick walking out the door, and the main rumor out there is Belichick would be very interested in the New York Giants if that was ever available to him, and he decided he wanted to leave Boston.
There's no way that happens. It would be thrilling.
That would be dramatic.
I would love to see Belichick somewhere without Tom Brady. It's not going to happen. Absolutely not. There's 0% chance of that happening. I would really enjoy it, though.
I would say a 1% chance because anything could happen. I mean, none of us thought... They're going
to hash their relationship. They're going to win the Super Bowl, and Tom Brady and Belichick will be hugging. I mean
that's honestly what a lot of the stuff I was seeing today is just like, we have this feud here right now, but it's all going to end with Tom Brady hugging Mark Wahlberg at the Super Bowl. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, I think it's a very, very slim chance, but I mean, if Belichick wanted to leave, I mean, you'd have a lot of coaches getting fired to make room for Belichick.
Belichick could have any job he wanted. Any job he wanted. There isn't an owner in the NFL that wouldn't fire their coach for Bill Belichick. And if there is, they're wrong. Because Belichick's the greatest coach of all time. I mean it's
I don't
certainly
know.
Something you agree on before you fired Mike Zimmer or anyone, but...
About taking shots at Mike Zimmer.
No, he was the first good coach that popped in my head.
Because I was thinking, I don't know, I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were really committed to Dirk Cutter.
Oh, God. Don't get me started on Dirk Cutter. Garbage coach. How is he still employed?
Because Gruden was asking for $100 million.
With McAdoo gone, is Cutter the worst coach in the NFL?
Maybe Vance Joseph.
Maybe.
But I mean, I just don't know what really happened in Denver this year. I mean, he started out really well. I mean, I'd have to think because there's a lot of openings already. I think Marvin Lewis is a good coach. I'm just shocked he's still there.
Yeah, that's one thing that we need to talk about. Marvin Lewis was fired. This was reported and confirmed. They were moving on from Marvin Lewis. They win a game, and suddenly Marvin Lewis is going to still be the coach.
Well, apparently how it came out now is they were offering, it was basically up to Marvin Lewis. So I guess it was similar to a Bruce Arians situation. And there was a lot of talk that Marvin Lewis would move into a front office role. And even when asked after the win, he said, look, it's a lot more complicated than that, whether he was being let go at the end of the year. So I guess he just ended up having a change of heart and said, all right, sign a 2-year extension here.
Look, Marvin Lewis is a good guy. He's a good coach. I think Marvin Lewis is a really good coach. He's been in Cincinnati for 15 years. You know how many playoff games he's won?
Yeah, it's about 0.
Yeah.
I mean, to be
15 years.
I mean, it took him 8 years to have a winning season.
15 years. He hasn't won a single playoff game? How are you employed?
I mean, honestly, if you think of an organization, if you can pick any organization to go to, it's probably Cincinnati Bengals, because that's some loyalty right there.
I don't understand it. And what I've heard from a couple places is Marvin Lewis is doing exactly what the Bengals want. They want to be relevant on a really low payroll.
Yeah.
Which is what they are.
That's absolutely
they're always
what they are.
relevant, and they don't have a huge payroll. Look, my boy AJ Green's got to get out of there, because that's just purgatory.
I mean, there's a lot of teams that operate that way, and you don't see it as often in the NFL, because you honestly don't see that as often in salary cap sports. But I mean, even the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have done that in the past. The only time they actually really spent money was the year they signed Carl Nicks, Vincent Jackson, and a couple other players, and that was because the NFL instituted a rule that you get penalized if you don't spend enough of the cap, because the Bucs were basically paying everybody peanuts and had like the most cap room ever before Cleveland and Oakland came along the past few years, and then they were basically going to get penalized for it, so they ended up having to spend money. And some teams do that.
Look, I'm no businessman, but there are very few owners of sports franchises that their primary income comes from their sports franchise. If you get into sports, go win. Like, the only people I can think of that their wealth comes from the team is the Buss family with the Lakers.
I was thinking that, and I was thinking the Steinbrenners as well in New York.
Okay, that's a good one. Although
both of those are storied franchises.
I mean, and if they haven't done enough to diversify themselves by now, given how much success those franchises have had, especially the Steinbrenners.
Well, that's why I say this. It didn't start out that the Yankees were their primary source of payroll, but they were one of the first teams to, or source of income, excuse me. They're one of the first teams to institute their own sports network. So the Yes Network brings in about $3 billion. So that's why that's their primary income.
But I don't even know if that counts. These are mostly billionaire businessmen that just decide to buy a sports franchise. If you decide to buy, just go try and win. Like, be competitive. Why are you getting into sports if you're not competitive?
Well, it's like Tillman Fertitta with the Houston Rockets. He just bought them for like $2.3 billion. He's a Houston guy that wants to see the team win.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a billionaire businessman and ponied up to get his hometown team.
I mean, sports franchises they're not great cash flow businesses. I mean, a lot of times you're going to have operating losses. So you're really depending on that asset to keep appreciating.
Right.
Like when, Cleveland owner.
Dan Gilbert.
Dan Gilbert says, well, I'm operating the team at a loss. Yeah, you're operating the team at a loss, but you've made like $1 billion on just owning the team, because whenever you sell it, you're going to have made all this money. So who cares about you operating at a couple million loss? But you don't get in the business to make money, in my opinion. Like, you get into sports because you're competitive. And yeah, you see it as a good investment, and you do want to make money. Eventually, when you sell the team, the plan is for it to be worth more than you bought it for. But why buy a sports franchise if you don't want to try and win?
How about you ask Bruce Sherman and Derek Jeter?
That's a great point.
I don't know.
And apparently Bruce Sherman is only in because he's like a huge sports nerd and he wants to be best buddies with Derek Jeter.
That's apparently it. He's like a hedge fund manager that's apparently...
He's super into like baseball cards and memorabilia and stuff, and he just wants to be good buddies with Derek Jeter.
I mean, he's the equivalent of Marlins Man, except with a lot more money, even though Marlins Man has a ton of money. That's basically what it is.
I just don't understand why you get into this business and you don't want to win. Like, I understand if you desperately want to win and you don't, like the Redskins or the Browns or these teams that are trying to win, but they keep failing.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you look at Jimmy Haslam, and that's a man who wants to win.
He wants to win so bad.
I mean, you can see that. You can see that with the Cleveland Browns and also his alma mater, the University of Tennessee. He's been making moves to try to get both those teams winning for a long time.
I don't know. Do you have any idea why this even happens? If you owned a sports franchise and it wasn't your primary means of income, would you do anything other than just try and win? Because that's what you do as a sports franchise?
I guess it just really depends on the industry you're in and different circumstances. I mean, some of these guys, blanking on the Bengals owner's name right now, but I'm pretty sure he bought the franchise decades ago.
Oh, I'm sure. And he's sitting on probably like 1,000% asset increase.
Absolutely. I think that's honestly what it is. And I think he's keeping it in the family. So I think that has become his primary source of income because of how basically the NFL has appreciated so much.
But it's not, I don't know. I don't understand how you buy. He had to be rich before he bought in, which means he had to have streams of income before he bought in.
Right, but I mean, it could be those streams of income are gone. I mean, for all I know, he was in the newspaper business and sold his newspapers back in the day for a ton of money, and then now he owns the Bengals.
Sold off to Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, I mean, for all I know, he did something like that. I mean, because a lot of these people made money in industries that aren't really thriving anymore, or, I mean, in some cases don't even exist anymore, and now they just own their team. I mean, what did Jerry Richardson...
sell the team.
And then... Yeah, I mean, he can sell the team, but I don't think he really wants to.
But,
I mean, it's like, Jerry Richardson, I don't really know what he did to make his money. I mean, he was an NFL player and then, bought the Panthers. I mean, that was his primary source of income, if I remember correctly.
Well, he's not 100% owner.
Well, that's
he owns, 51%.
Yeah, 51%. That's right. It's going to be Sean Diddy Combs 51% here soon.
I doubt that.
Yeah, probably not. But it's fun to think about.
Did you see how he said he was going to buy the Panthers and make Kaepernick the quarterback? It's like, you do remember you have a quarterback already. You have a quarterback that's better than Kaepernick already, right?
That has a low-key rivalry with Colin Kaepernick from back in the day.
I think Cam is super overrated. Cam's better than Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm a huge sports fan and I'm not a billionaire businessman.
Well, you want to run your team like Steve Ballmer did. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for Steve Ballmer really when he bought the Clippers, but you want to run it...
Not yet. It's still May in the future.
In the future, yes.
The first round of his experiment failed.
Right. Where the team looked like it was poised for multiple, at least championship runs, and then everything kind of fell apart. So I think they're kind of on the backside of their winning cycle. So I think they're going to have some lean years here pretty soon. But I think it'll work out in the end for Steve Ballmer because he's a good dude.
As soon as he fires Doc Rivers, everything will be okay.
And I think he's starting to realize that mistake because he brought other people in. Because when he bought the team, it was basically like him and it was Doc. And he was basically telling Doc, all right, you know the basketball operations side, you do whatever you want to do. As long as we win.
Want out of your owner. I just think Doc is...
not a good executive?
Yeah. And he's starting to show that maybe he's not a good coach. I don't know. I
mean, he kind of has been living off a reputation for a really long time. I always thought he was a good coach, but outside of his Celtics years, he didn't really do great in Orlando.
And even with the Celtics, he had the one good season with Paul Pierce, but then he didn't do anything else until he got Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen. So It took him getting one of the 3 best shooters of all time and one of the 30 best players of all time to be good again. I don't know. Maybe he's not that good.
maybe it's a little Jeff Fisher syndrome where his reputation is kind of
Just
really
carries
outweighing.
him. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I think's going on with him. But we'll see what happens with the Clippers here soon. But that is the kind of owner you want, like kind of basically a win at all costs kind of guy. But at the same time, I think you also want an owner who also can check his emotions, because you also don't want an owner that's, I mean, it happened to George Steinbrenner back in the day where he traded away all of the team's like younger talent and then basically went out and signed all these free agents that were older and like less productive. And then you'd see like the young Yankee talent blossom into stars elsewhere. And then, you know, your team ends up going through some lean years and you just keep trying to throw money on the fire and it just doesn't work. So, I mean, you want an owner that's kind of in between those two stages that can understand and let the front office do what they want to do whenever there needs to be a rebuild. But then also at the same time, whenever you see the window opening, they go for it full force.
Yeah. I just want an owner that wants to win it all. That's what I want. I don't want an owner that cares about making money. I don't want an owner that wants to cut payroll. I want an owner that, if they want to restructure the team, that's fine, if they think it'll help long term. But not a Derek Jeter, Bruce Sherman situation where they're cutting payroll to cut payroll.
Right, where it doesn't even seem like they're really getting a lot of value back for their guys. And it's just, that's basically what it is. And another, just on the Jeter topic, Project Wolverine has come out officially.
Oh, gosh.
Did you?
This guy.
Yeah, Project
so full of
Wolverine.
himself.
I wonder what his favorite team is. Do you know? I wonder who his college football team is.
Probably the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Yeah, I think he's an Ohio guy at heart, honestly. You know, he's from Michigan and all that, but
Which do you think is his favorite X-Men?
Storm.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's mine.
I mean, Halle Berry.
I mean,
how could you not be?
I mean, absolutely. But anyway, as a part of Project Wolverine that was released to MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred ahead of time, no matter what he says. Anyway, he
you dirty liar, Commissioner. You dirty liar.
Hey, Dan Le Batard boxed him in. He didn't know where else to go.
How dare you say something that's not true? Like, to someone who knows that you're lying, and then when he
that
gets
has
mad
Project
about it,
Wolverine in front of him,
and then when he calls you a liar, you get mad at him for calling you a liar when you just lied. I don't understand it. Rob Manfred, I used to respect you. What the heck, dude? What the heck?
I think it's
Did
just
you not read the documents that were presented to you?
I think it's just one of those situations he just really didn't know what to say, or it's almost a little buyer's remorse where he's like, oh wow, I didn't really know it was going to go this bad in Miami,
I
and
think
he tried to cover it up.
Well, and I think he clearly didn't know. If you don't know what we're talking about, by the way, I don't think we've talked about this on the show before.
Maybe
a few weeks ago, Rob Manfred went on the Le Batard show and got absolutely destroyed. Dan Le Batard called him out on basically some documents that he had read and knew that the commissioner had read, and the commissioner said he had not seen that data, and Dan Le Batard called him a liar because he had seen the data. And then Rob Manfred got really, really mad because someone called him a liar despite the fact that he was blatantly lying.
And besides the fact he was blatantly lying, and then Dan Le Batard called out what the commissioner really cared about, and then the commissioner basically said, you don't know what I care about or whatever, and defended the fact that he understands South Florida because he has a property in South Florida, which basically means he has a vacation home he comes to every January.
Which means he knows exactly what South Florida wants, knows all about the Florida customer.
That's right.
Get over yourself, Rob Manfred. Come on, man.
I still respect you. I do, and I think you've done a really great job as a commissioner. I think this is kind of the first strike against you.
Adam Silver would have handled that so much better. Adam Silver's my guy. I love that dude.
See, Adam Silver was getting some competition at the top because, I mean, there's basically Gary Bettman and Roger Goodell as about far down as you could possibly go in NFL commissioner popularity, and basically any sports commissioner popularity. And then at the top, you had Adam Silver and Rob Manfred kind of battling it out.
Are you trying to imply that Adam Silver had Rob Manfred like
as competition?
No, as like Adam Silver set this whole thing up. He said, "Did Adam Silver give Dan Le Batard the documents?" He sabotaged the whole thing.
That jerk!
What do you mean that jerk? That's brilliant. Only one can stand at the top, and it is me.
And it is going to be the National Basketball Association.
Adam Voldemort Silver. Kind of looks like Voldemort.
I mean, he does. He looks very menacing, but he also looks like the kind of guy that's also like really nice. Anyway, back to Project Wolverine after this tangent.
Project Wolverine, which is a tangent of another tangent of another. I don't even remember where we started, but go ahead.
We weren't even going to talk about the Patriots thing. We just ended up getting there.
The Patriots thing. We weren't going to talk about Project Wolverine. It's not on our piece of paper.
Hey man, I like to go with the flow.
No, I'm with you. Follow the tangent, man. That's what we do here.
That's right. That's a rollout show for you. Anyway, Project Wolverine. So it has the payroll slashing involved, but I don't think it was actually to this degree because in the report they were supposed to get a lot of MLB ready talent back. You know, more like what the Chicago White Sox did last year with Chris Sale getting a bunch of top prospects in return.
When you trade the MVP, that's kind of what you should get back.
Instead of an expensive Starlin Castro and the number 9 prospect in the Yankee system, and then another dude who's like 6 years away.
Dude.
I mean, he's apparently pretty good, but he's 17 years old, and he's the Red Sox phenom third baseman's younger brother. Rafael Devers, this is Jose Devers. So there's not really a whole lot about him, but that he looks pretty good for a 17-year-old playing in the United States. That's about all you got. So we'll see what he develops into. He could become a future star, but he was not on the Yankees' top 30 prospects at the beginning of the year, just to go to show you. So Project Wolverine has apparently very aggressive sales goals and attendance goals for 2018, where a part of their structure was they're actually going to raise payroll for next season, go out and sign a few free agents. So they would get up to like the $95 million stage compared to like $80 million where they're wanting to be this year. And then after 2019, they were going to drop it all the way down to 75 for 2 more years. And then apparently they were going to slowly start spending again. So they apparently had very, quote unquote, very aggressive attendance goals for this year. So they expected the attendance to rise after they traded away Giancarlo Stanton, Marcelo Ozuna, and potentially even more guys from their team, which basically the only reason... D. Gordon as well, who's very fun to watch and adored by the fans down there. Thank you for that.
Not often I clue you in on baseball.
You know what? I was blanking for a second. You saved me. I appreciate that. And potentially trading Christian Yelich, who's Bradley's boy.
It's my boy. He's real good.
He's really good.
So cheap.
He's so cheap as well.
Why would you trade him? The whole point is to cut payroll, but you don't need to cut him because he's so cheap.
Well, they can actually get prospects for their system if they trade him. You know, at least that's the theory. You know, who knows? What they
should have done with all the other guys they traded?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they got some decent prospects from the Cardinals from Marcelo Ozuna, but it also wasn't the top prospects in the Cardinals system. It was, instead of basically the top 6 guys, it was basically the top maybe like 7 through 10 guys. So still pretty good because the Cardinals have a deep farm system, but also not... When you trade a guy who hit 38 homers last season, who's controlled for pretty cheaply the next 2 years, you expect to get a little bit more than what they did. And honestly, that's kind of, no offense to any Marlins fans or anything, it's kind of laughable. Because if you had a home run chase going on where a bunch of people were showing up to the ballpark that hadn't been showing up to the ballpark before, seeing if Giancarlo Stanton got 60 homers. And
apparently, they were in Project Wolverine. Their aggressive numbers of what they thought attendance would be were based on last year's numbers that were actually just false. Like according to Dan Lebitard, who has seen the documents that describe the attendance was wildly false, and he called that out swiftly. Like the numbers the attendance was not this good last year. It wasn't. It absolutely was not. So
it's honestly, probably a lot of those attendance figures were factored into like groups and season tickets and people who didn't show up, or if they bought like a flex plan package and then they ended up only showing up to one game out of the 10, it still marked them for like the 10 games or something like that.
The numbers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see teams do that consistently.
You see all businesses do that consistently.
So it's very interesting to see that they basically just have aggressive attendance goals after everybody in South Florida hates them.
It's absurd. It makes no sense. I don't understand why they think people would come to a game. If you're a Marlins fan, shouldn't go to a single game. The only time they should have people in their stadium is when the Yankees come to town and you have the Yankees fans in Florida go to the game.
And you have Jeter out there walking out to throw out the first pitch in his Yankees uniform. And the captain comes back, takes a few grounders out at short and everything. It's a big fanfare for him.
You know, there is a bonus written into the business plan called the Jeter bonus.
Oh, gosh.
And it's if they don't have to ask the investors for more money, Jeter gets a bonus. How absurd is that? Well, they need to cut payroll so aggressively that if they overspend, Jeter loses out on money. That's so absurd.
Well, and it's also absurd that he gets rewarded if they don't spend money.
That's the point.
Yeah, it's like, I mean,
he
gets rewarded if they don't spend money, which is the whole thing of the franchise, which honestly goes to Dan Le Batard's point and why I think Rob Manfred has some buyer's remorse here by choosing the offer from Jeter and Sherman, because it basically just goes to show that MLB just cared about making a lot of money, which they did. I mean, who would have thought that the Marlins would get $1.2 billion?
They wanted to up the standard price for a franchise, and they got it up.
They did.
Got it all the way up to $1.2 billion for a bad franchise in a town where no one wants to watch the team anymore.
Absolutely not. And
their taxpayer-paid stadium's beautiful, though.
Oh, honestly, though, if you get a chance to go down to that stadium, it's a beautiful stadium. I love it. Derek Jeter's probably going to slash everything good about that stadium out of it so he can make more money.
I guarantee you concession rates are going up.
Oh, yeah. Concession rates are going up.
Can we take a moment to appreciate Arthur Blank?
I was just about to bring that up. Arthur Blank with his affordable concession prices in the billion-dollar stadium.
So I went to a Monday Night Football game at Raymond James to watch Tampa and Atlanta. Got 2 hot dogs and 2 drinks. Cost me $24.
And honestly, that's affordable for NFL stadiums.
And 2 drinks. Wasn't even like a jumbo hot dog. It was 2 normal-sized hot dogs, mustard on them, on some stale buns, and 2 small-sized sodas. Was $24. Arthur Blank, you're a hero among men for your reasonably priced concessions. If you don't know, just Google like Falcons concession prices. Their hot dogs are like $3. Their sodas are like $2. It's amazing.
Oh, it's very affordable.
It's like fast food restaurant prices. It's so fair.
And honestly, it happens for anything that's at the stadium. It's been going on for the college football. I mean, for the bowl games, the Peach Bowl, they were talking about the affordable prices at the concession stands. And it's going to happen for the national championship game as well. So
Arthur Blank is a good dude.
He is.
He's the owner of the Falcons, by the way, if you don't know who I'm talking about. What a good dude.
I agree with you. I am not an Atlanta Falcons fan, but I do have mad respect for Arthur Blank. He's one of the owners. Not only is he a guy that really, really wants to win, he's a guy that really cares about his fans, too.
He really cares about the community around his team and the people who come to watch the games. He really cares.
And he's a good businessman as well. I will give him credit. I mean, for Home Depot as well, this is also just another side thing. He offered a lot of free supplies for hurricane victims and hurricane ravaged towns and everything like that. So that's another really good thing for him.
Arthur Blank, you're a good dude.
Good guy. You're not Derek Jeter.
No, not even close.
Derek Jeter would charge you like, $1,500 to use Marlins Park as a hurricane shelter. I mean, he probably would. Right. Yeah.
Charge parking fees for hurricane shelter victims. I could see that.
Yeah, hey, you gotta make that $1.2 billion back somehow.
That's horrible.
Oh, well. I mean, we'll see. Hopefully, Marlins fans, I hope you get a winner. but also at the same time, it's just, I understand the process. I know you're not making a lot of money, and I know you need to cut some payroll, but to just see it happen in this fashion again, and a lot of it was because of what Jeffrey Loria did beforehand, because he had the wherewithal to know that he was planning on selling the team this year. But at the same time, it's really sad for you guys. You guys got swindled out of basically really good players and some of the most promising, most entertaining MLB stars to watch. And with a couple of additions, I mean, you probably wouldn't have been a World Series contender, but you would have made some noise. And you guys deserved that.
With some pitching, they could have been a World Series contender.
I mean, with that offense and how young all those players were, I mean, it's amazing. And honestly, it's unfortunate to go back to the Jose Fernandez situation. It also may have been different if he had still been alive and everything and on the team. But I mean, with a couple of pitching additions, I mean, they really could have done something. I mean, even if Wei-Yin Chen had not been hurt, I mean, and he rebounded and actually pitched well, I mean, that's another really pretty good starting pitcher when he is healthy and pitches well. And you could have made some noise in the NL East, because the NL East overall is not very good outside the Nationals. So it's tough to see. That team in the division and overall is kind of on the up and up, but we'll see what happens with the Marlins and the Jeter and Sherman group.
Well, in conclusion of today's show, it's the Rollout Showdown. Georgia, Alabama. One person wins, one person loses. Either Weston will be very happy next week, or I will be very happy next week. But one of us will be very happy next week. Hopefully it's a great game.
Hopefully it is a great game.
Or if it's a blowout, I hope Georgia just destroys Alabama.
That's just rude.
I would be rubbing it in your face so hard. I'm not a gracious winner.
No, you're not. You're not like me. I'm a gracious winner.
You are, and I respect you for that. But you know what? You've had a lot of success recently, okay?
Hey, you know
I've
what?
Had none.
I mean, we have not won a national championship in 2 years, Bradley.
I hate you. Goodbye.
In 2 years. You know how long of a drought that is?
Thank you, everybody, for listening. We very much appreciate your attendance and your ears. If you would like to leave us a review on iTunes, go do that. If you would like to give us shout-outs on social media, go do that. If you would like to go to our website, therolloutsports.com, go do that. Download our podcast and listen to our stuff. We love you all. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. And if you want to leave us some topics that you all would like to have us talk about, please do. And we appreciate you listening. And happy 2018 to all. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.